Okay, so the title of this video is When Spirituality Isn't So Spiritual, or When Alternatives Really Aren't Very Alternative at All. So what do we mean by that? Well, basically we can look at the process in a very simple and easy to understand way. Whereas we start off with a whole bunch of sort of mundane conditioning, right? A lot of musts and mustn'ts, should and shouldn'ts, and pressure to become something, to be something, to really do something. And maybe this is mainstream religion, maybe this is a sort of mainstream culture, maybe this is a family programming. Either way, it's often very tied to the sort of mundane world or the physical dimension of things. So that's the first step, and then the second step is that a person says, this is not very good, or this isn't working, or this is mundane, or this is only so physical, and really in some way this original conditioning is put down, it's denied, and it creates a desire for an alternative. And this is really common these days. You hear about alternative spirituality, or alternative medicine, alternative diet, whatever. Pretty big, pretty popular. So what happens is that the supposed alternative is really not much of an alternative at all, but it's actually more so just a process of transference. So what I mean is that we start off with this existing programming, and really this program is just transferred over to whatever the new thing is. So now instead of it being mundane, now it's spiritual, now it's conscious, now it's evolutionary, now it's all of these lofty, airy-fairy kind of words that most of the time don't really mean anything. It's kind of like how propaganda works. If you look at political campaigns, you look at marketing campaigns, you look at propaganda in general throughout human history, what you do is you take a word that sounds cool, that people can kind of project themselves upon, but you never actually really define really what it means. So, for example, when Obama was campaigning, it was all about change, and we're going to change this and change that. Well, what does that even mean? Change means something different to everyone. And change could not necessarily even be positive. Change could be pretty terrible. And we could look at so many different examples from all of these different political arenas and marketing arenas. But it's basically slogans and mottos and all these things. It's how this stuff works. So when people start throwing around big words about like awareness and consciousness and balance and this and that, we have to be a little bit careful, because oftentimes this is how cults work. This is how propaganda works. And maybe it's not necessarily that useful unless we actually can define and get very specific and clear about what we are talking about, what it means for us, what it means for them, what it means for other people, rather than just blindly agreeing to it. So just a tangent there on how that's maybe not ideal. So more simply put, basically all of these old pressures and stresses and anxieties are just transferred over to a new set of pressure and anxieties and shoulds and musts and mustn'ts. So we deny all of the old sort of mundane conditioning, and then now we just replace it with a whole new set of mundane conditioning. We have to eat this way, we have to do this, we have to be this way and say these things, and we can't say these things. We only have to say these things. We can only be this way, we can't be that way. We have to wear these clothes and only associate with these people, and da-da-da-da-da. It's all pretty much the same process. It's just no one looks at it because we're fixated and blinded by words. Oh, this is conscious. This is awareness. This is going to give me all of these amazing things. I'm so excited that I can't even take a second and think, I don't know, maybe this is kind of the same. And herein is where we get to kind of the crux of the matter. Because often the process happens sort of outside of awareness. And this is where a lot of denial comes from, a lot of repression and suppression and spiritual arrogance comes from. And this is where you get a lot of passive aggressiveness in this world. It's really quite interesting, and it's kind of a natural result, meaning if you're having all this stuff in your psyche that you're trying to suppress, it's gonna pop out somewhere. Here is where you also get the obsession with labels, practices and systems and disciplines, and you get, out of that, you get all the kind of energy junkies and hypochondriacs and devotees and all of the shapes and sizes of these different things. People just jumping from this to thing, and this teacher, this system, that system, this thing, this modality, this da-da-da-da. And just basically, it's kind of like a child collecting toys. And after a period of time, they have this massive toy box. But it's still just a toy box. It's not really doing anything or going anywhere. It's just mostly kind of a lot of entertainment, or almost kind of masturbatory in some way. And we'll get into that why, or we'll get into the why of that in just a little bit. And also, too, it's really common that you meet someone and their entire identity, their entire conversation about themselves is just all about whatever the thing is. And this is really common for, the whole meme that goes around on the internet about CrossFit people, about vegans, about extreme Christians, like pretty much anyone who gets really extremely into something, eventually it's it. That's all they got. And everything just revolves around that. And often in there you'll find a lot of themes of redemption, or finding the light. I was lost, but now I'm found, or I was impure and now I'm pure, and all of these kinds of things. And now, really, the issue here is not even necessarily the things that we've listed or talked about, because actually they're one and the same thing. Because oftentimes, I would say the most common example is people that grow up in America, grow up in a religious sort of environment, which is most of America. Even if you're not in that community, it's still, in God we trust is on all of our money, for example. Look at the founding of the country. That's a different conversation. So people grow up in that and then get into yoga or something, or some Hindu-esque based sort of thing, or Buddhism or something, and just kind of turn it immediately into a form of Christianity, because that's just what was already in here. And like, oh my God, it's similar. These are really similar. It's like, they're maybe not. I think that's what you call a plateau or limitation, because maybe they're not very similar. It's kind of like this bullshit you see online about many songs, one truth, or many dances, one song, and all this type of shit. And it lists, or it shows, all the major figureheads from all the religions, and they're like, oh, it's all the same. They're all leading us to the same place. They're all saying the same thing, but they're just different. It's all one. Yay. In my opinion, it's all one if you don't look very far into it. It's all one if all you see is your own pre-existing conditioning and never actually see an alternative to that, or see anything outside of it, or experience anything outside of it, or in some way loosen that stuff up. Which is also another really common thing. And my opinion, again, is just if you don't really think about it, then yeah, maybe it's kind of the same, but it's just, if you actually look at it for more than 2 minutes, it's really not. But that's a different conversation as well. So again, the issue here, really what we're talking about, comes down to 3 things. All the other stuff aside, really comes down to 3 things. Number 1, the real issue is the separation and fragmentation of ourself. Because if we're having this conditioning and this approach to life that's fragmented and separated, wherever we go, it's going to be fragmented and separated. Meaning, if we're a bitter, angry, pissed off person, it doesn't fucking matter what religion we practice, what drugs we take, what diet we eat, we're still going to be a bitter, pissed off person. If we're depressed, or if we're joyous, or if we're whatever we are, we're just going to take that probably wherever we go. Unless we eventually start to loosen that a little bit. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the disconnect and the denial of our inherent nature. Number 3 is the disconnect and denial of our inner truth. Meaning our internal guidance system, our internal wisdom, whatever you want to call it, It's more experiential, something we all kind of have to feel and figure out for ourselves. Can't really define it that easily. So whether it's the mundane programming or the supposedly spiritual programming, often it's all pretty much exactly the same. When you really break it down to its pieces, when it's processes, its dynamics, its mechanics, it's whatever you want to call it. It's the same at the root. But again, if you don't look, if you just stay up here and are blinded by the words and the catchphrases and slogans and the mantras, then yeah, it seems very different, but it's actually the same. And the issue, again, is the three things that we just listed. And for me, that's where a lot of good stuff comes from, looking at those three things. So, I don't know. Maybe this has been true. Maybe it hasn't. I don't know. It's just my opinion and just me sitting on the couch or sitting on the floor talking about it on the internet. Pretty interesting. So some people are going to probably think, well, then what am I supposed to do without all this self-improvement stuff and all this spiritual stuff? What am I going to do? Or on the flip side, people take everything that I'm saying and assume it's this like apathetic, sort of negative, depressed sort of thing. It really isn't. It's actually neither of those perspectives at all. But yeah, who knows? Anyways, thanks for watching this video. Hopefully it was entertaining, and I'll talk to you soon.